Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Nothing But Bangers, aka MBB, aka Bangers, aka I've got the last weekend of tournaments for this meta wrapped up right here, as well as another first place interview where they're actually going to talk about the potential for the winning deck and how it may change in the next format with brand new cards. So stay tuned for that, and also I'll share some of my thoughts currently as we move forward towards a new meta. Let's get into it. The Pocket Legends League tournament has had as many as 600 or more players, but they do move the tournaments around to try to accommodate multiple time zones from across the world. And I believe this time zone was specifically catered to people in Asia. So you only saw a little bit over 300 people signed up for this tournament, and the winning deck was actually an Articuno 18 trainer deck, which I know a lot of people won't be too happy to hear about. But again, hey, it is a deck that can definitely win a lot of games, especially if the player gets hot. But looking at the other decks, there were a few decks that stood out. One that I do want to specifically single out is the 5th place finisher, a Frog EX member, which is a French team, if I remember correctly. They decided to bring this Arceus Greninja deck that has popped up for like the past couple of weeks in a couple of different tournaments and in some of these leagues that are team battle oriented. And you can see that they do play two energy types, the fire and the water energies. They're using Druddigon potentially as an aggressor as well as a wall. And then they also have Heatran to potentially be activated as a spirit link, or as the link. So that way they can kind of go ahead and free retreat if Arceus is on the board. The Greninja kind of serves a role of being kind of like a put things into range for a one hit, right? Or maybe it finishes something off, or maybe it's activating your Cyrus that you have in hand because now you've hit them for 20 damage with your Greninja. So there's a lot of different ways that this deck can win. It's really interesting, very versatile for like, when things get going, you just kind of worry about like those weird games where you just don't see the right energy, which will happen time to time, or you worry about those games where you can't find the Greninja line, but you are playing that one Pokemon communication. You're playing one Leaf as well. You'll notice no Sabrina and only one Giant Cape as a tool. So there's a few different cards here, but just not a lot of room whenever you're playing this many Pokemon in one deck. And that's kind of one of the things that will kind of stand out, right? 11 Pokemon, and then you're still playing Pokemon communication. So even if you do get Pokemon communication to like resolve, there's a chance that you whiff. But again, like when the pieces line up, the deck looks like it could be very good and can definitely take down a lot of games. So it is kind of cool to see, still innovation at this stage of the meta. And like for a lot of people, including myself, we really thought that this meta would continue for like another month. So the fact that we do have new cards that will 100% change the meta, and maybe it won't be drastically different, but it'll 100% sure change, even if it's just a little bit. But those new cards will definitely be a curveball, especially as we get ranked. But again, big shout out to the competitors and the tournament organizers and the judges for the Pocket Legends League, and I hope to see more of their tournaments as we move into the new phase of the next meta. Let's take a look at the Ursiiday tournament. The Ursiiday tournament had a pretty interesting winner. It had the Rampardos deck take home the victory, but also the finals was Gyarados against Rampardos. So kind of an interesting matchup, and the Gyarados deck that we do see a lot of nowadays is going to be this Gyarados with Manaphy and Origin Form Palkia. So this is kind of like the new way to play Gyarados that we've seen for a few weeks now, and it seems to be probably the best way to run Gyarados at this point in time. And there's a lot of good things about this Gyarados deck at the moment, and obviously things are going to change as we move towards a new meta. But this is something to keep in the back of your mind where, hey, maybe you still have a few tournaments that you want to play in before the format leaves. Maybe you really enjoyed this format, so you want to jam this deck. But again, the deck is really solid. I've watched it play a few times, and then, I've played with Palkia Origin Form a few times myself, and honestly, it's great whenever you're able to Manaphy and, get in that Origin Palkia, right? And then eventually bring in that Gyarados as your finisher, right? So it's really nice, and Gyarados' bulk is something that just kind of keeps it relevant, as well as that 140 damage that it can do. So overall, when you take a look at the metagame, and if you were to compare these tournaments, they're very, there's a lot of similarities, but again, Dialga continues to be very solid, as well as the Rampardos. We've seen Gallade popping up a little bit more lately. Weavile Darkrai definitely came back on the scene as of last week. The first place winner playing that Weavile Darkrai deck. And then obviously the 18 trainer decks. And then you even see that Arceus Greninja deck that I just talked about with the Pocket Legends League. As far as the top cut breakdown, you see, you know, almost 40% of the top cut was Dialga Arceus. Then you've got about 17 to 20% were Rampardos, depending on if you're rounding, right? And then you've got a lot of the other decks is like, you know, 4 of them, 3 of them, and 2 of them, and then a lot of 1-ofs. So still, again, you know, you do kind of notice that like with this meta, and you know, you can take this for what you will, but with this meta, it's very clear that like you do have to be able to beat Dialga Arceus, and then like if you can beat Rampardos Lucario as well, like that's like the ultimate kind of like duo that you need to be able to beat, right? And if your deck can do that, you have a great chance to win these tournaments. Now the game will probably change as we see a lot of new cards kind of, you know, join the fray, and you know, who knows like just how good some of those cards are going to be. I think like one of the biggest like recurring themes in my comments that I noticed after I reviewed the revealed card so far is like I think a lot of people are under the impression I think the new EXs like suck or like they're not very good, and I think that it's just like we don't know enough about the rest of the set to really like say that. Now, is there a lot of like potential for some of these cards? I think that's 100% true. It's just going to depend like what other cards are we getting in the set? What are the pre-evolutions, right? What's the stage 1? What's the basic looking like for some of those stage 2s? You know, what other trainers items are we going to get, right? So there's just a lot of questions that could definitely like make some of these cards that we've seen revealed a lot better. And then like, hey, maybe some cards that we haven't even seen yet are going to have a big impact on the game. So I'm not ready to like rush judgment on what we've seen revealed just yet as far as like good or bad, but there definitely are some cards that I'm more excited about, and that would definitely be cards like the Pachirisu. Like that card looks like pretty interesting, even though fighting is so prevalent, and that's like one of the big drawbacks of that card. But again, looking at the state of the meta, I would say like this, like looking back, I think that this meta was very interesting. I think that once Dialga Arceus, you know, showed its how strong it is, I think the meta kind of had to warp around it, and that's where you started to see these Rampardos Lucario decks, and then Gallade, and then eventually stuff like Weavile Darkrai, and then even the weekend where Palkia, the Origin Form version, really came out. I thought that this was like a really cool meta. I thought that there was some depth in this meta. I thought that there were some really powerful decks, but it wasn't like you were pigeonholed into like only playing those decks. I feel like you still could have like 4 or 5 decks that you could play and still like feel relatively good about entering a tournament with them, which is really cool. So again, I do think this was a solid meta. I know that some people weren't fans of it, but I do think that this was pretty decent compared to like some of the things that we may have seen like in the previous format, where it was like Dark Zone and then Raid Boss Executor, right? Like the other decks are just kind of like trying to compete, but like kind of not doing a great job of it. So let's get to the first place interview. Big shout out to MST for taking home first place in this tournament. I reached out to them as soon as the tournament ended, and as soon as I got done live streaming the grand finals for the GGB League, which is the team battle league that I just mentioned on my channel. If you haven't seen that, definitely check out that video. But basically, when I looked at this deck, I was like, okay, I mean, it's like, you know, sort of standard in a way. But again, like just kind of looking through these card choices, you see the one of Hitmonchan, you see the one of Sudowoodo, the one of Marshadow. So they brought a little bit, you know, a little bit of a change up with the technology that they decided to bring. You got that one of Pokemon communication, and everything else, you know, I would say is pretty standard. Let's get to the interview though. Starting off with the interview, and obviously I'll leave this on the screen and kind of scroll through these. I'm not going to read word for word necessarily, but MST was super helpful, and honestly, like this was a super easy conversation to have. So I decided to kind of like stretch this out a little bit as opposed to sending all the questions at once. So basically, I started off with, hey, first question, what deck did you bring? What made you bring it? And then obviously they brought the Rampardos deck. They thought it had, you know, it was one of the most well-rounded decks in all possible matchups. There's like not a auto loss matchup for them, is kind of the way that they felt. There's unfavored matchups which you can still play to your outs and take the win. So, and then they said they especially liked the Hitmonchan technology versus the Origin form Palkia and Manaphy, and they liked it a lot in the mirror as well. And so you can kind of imagine like Hitmonchan, being able to kind of trade, swap a little damage with Origin form Palkia, and then obviously the Hitmonchan can definitely put pressure on the Manaphy, which is a big deal, right? Like if you can't answer the Manaphy before it snowballs out of control, you got a lot of problems. So I really liked their justification for what they brought there. The next thing that I said is, I know it's a little tricky because the meta will change at least a little bit, but are there any cards that you would change moving forward, or are there any cards that caught your eye from the spoilers that may help this deck moving forward? They didn't want to change anything. They disliked Cyrus at first, but it morphed into the game, or morphed the game and basically made it something that pretty much everybody has to adapt to. The new cards that they like were the basic Pachirisu, because they thought that lightning types need a boost. So they're definitely looking forward to Pachirisu Luxray, which should be pretty interesting to see, especially because it could potentially be like an all one prize deck. So I think MST, just from the small conversation that we had, I do think that they enjoy one prize decks in a way. And I think that, seeing a card like Pachirisu definitely kind of got the wheels turning for them. The next part of the conversation is exactly what a lot of you are probably thinking. I said, oh, wow, I'm surprised you're looking at Electric considering how strong fighting is. Do you think this deck can carry the success it had into the next format? So by this deck, I'm talking about the Rampardos deck. And their response is they really liked Ionos, and definitely with Iono. So as long as fighting runs all single point Pokemon, Luxray has no chance, which is a pretty interesting take. It might be right. Luxray Pachirisu might do well versus EX decks. I wouldn't mind playing fighting for another format. I think it's fun and rewarding. And the fossil issues should go away with Iono. That was something that I thought needed to be talked about a little bit more, and that's also why I kind of liked doing the interview in this format as opposed to sending all the questions at once. So, I said, hey, just brainstorming for those who may pull an Iono and want to try, the Rampardos deck. What cards do you think you would change to fit Iono in? Or what are some cards that you could see swapping? For their list specifically, they said take out communication. Iono is basically another communication for your entire hand, but it does have like that drawback, right, of unbricking your opponent, right? So maybe your opponent's bricked, you use Iono, you fix their hand, but you also hopefully fix your hand. So it's a little bit of an issue. Then also it can send away supporters that you need. So they're definitely like on a wait and see, but they're interested in playing Iono. And they said in most cases, you might even get unbricked by your opponent running it. So there's going to be a whole strategy like about when to use Iono. So that's a really fascinating take and not something that I spent a lot of time on my card preview. So it's good to hear this from somebody else and kind of get some information from them as to like how they're approaching the card Iono. So I don't know, chat like, hey, people in the comments that, may be sticking around. What do you think about Iono? Is there going to be strategy for like when you use it? And then like, are you scared that cards like Iono will fix your opponent's hand more than they will help your strategy? I think that that's like a valid question. Let's keep going. I said it's a weird one because it's an inherent -1. So like you're losing one card in terms of card advantage when you use Iono. And obviously you can fix your opponent's hand, but I'm definitely interested in trying it. I think like, if your strategy is like so good, like in the Pokemon that you're trying to evolve or find is so good, then the pros might outweigh the cons of Iono, right? Like if you're playing, Charizard where you're just gonna one-shot everything and it can't get one hit, then like, yeah, Iono might be really good for a deck like that. And so like, that's kind of the curveball, right? Or if you're playing something like a one prize deck that just has to find something like a Rampardos to finish games, then I think Iono will be 100% worth it because you just might win the turn that you Iono. So like that's definitely valid. I think, the other thing to think about too is like with Iono, I think there is like cards that you want to play alongside Iono, and like stage 2 decks are probably going to like Iono a little bit more than some of the other decks, right? Like fossil decks I think are solid with Iono. I think cards like Chateau or Chatot, however you want to say it, are also decent with Iono depending on like how you build your deck, right? With a lot of Pokemon tools, a lot of fossils, you're going to be, dumping your hand a lot. So the one thing that I wanted to bring up too is a lot of people ask about the playtesting process or how, you prepare. Is there anything you would share with people who may be trying to improve and play in these tournaments or ranked? And they said, hey, I think just playing as many tournaments as you can is the best prep. So they would rather say, hey, I want to jam a lot of tournaments, right? Just to get an idea. You should also check all the different win rates in percentages for different matchups. I think you think about how you can improve them versus the list that already perform well. Basically trying to round out your deck list into giving you the best chances even despite RNG. And then it just becomes a repetition thing, right? Where you're just trying to get used to playing the deck and get the lines right. And then if you make top cuts regularly in these tournaments, you're going to win eventually. And I think that that's super important. Some people definitely need to hear that. You see some people say, hey man, I've made so many top cuts, but I just can't win the whole tournament. And inevitably, if you keep playing well, eventually the stars will definitely line up for you. The last part of the interview is a lot more lighthearted, and I thought we've covered some really great things with this. But basically, I just asked them, hey, is there any other, any other things that you want to share, any shout outs, anything like that after this huge win? And they said, hey, shout out to all the community that tuned in for both days. Couldn't have done it without them cheering me on. Appreciate each and every one of them. Shout out to Ursi for organizing as well. And they're very excited about playing in her future events. So again, a really cool interview. And as we wrap this up, I probably won't be talking as much about this meta, for the next few days as we get ready for the new set. And by the way, I will be live streaming the new set as soon as it releases. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be fun. But I just think about this meta and I'm like, man, the state of the game right now, it was going to be a long, 2 months if we didn't get a set this month. So on that end, I'm happy that we're getting new cards, but also it felt like, this meta was pretty decent. And I thought that a lot of people were able to innovate and cook some cool things. And, a lot of us really didn't see the new set coming so quickly. And so we're not able to really enjoy the meta as long as we could. But again, that's just the nature of the game, right? If they're going to drop new sets this frequently, then, hey, you just got to enjoy the meta while you got it, and then just keep up with how much it changes from week to week or tournament to tournament, and then just kind of enjoy the game that way. But again, with ranked coming, and then we're probably going to get more details about ranked over the next few days, so I'll be talking about that as well. But then, we might get a full set reveal before the release as well, so I'll talk about that as well. So we've got a lot of things on our plates coming up this week, and I'm very excited about the state of the game. I think it's in a good spot. And I know there's a lot of people that are not happy about the 18 trainer decks, but again, it's going to be interesting to see just how much better they're going to get as they keep releasing better trainer cards. A lot of people are kind of pointing at red and saying red is it's gonna help fight against the 18 trainer decks, but the other side of that is cards like a red are gonna fit pretty nicely into some of those 18 trainer decks as well. So again, state of the game I think is decent. I think it's fine, and I'm really looking forward to what we've got coming up. So hopefully you've got your hourglasses saved. Hopefully you remember not to open up your packs about 24 hours before the new set, so that way you can open up 2 packs of the new set. And hey, most of all, just remember to have fun and come hang out at the live stream so we can pull some cards together. But again, thank you for taking time out of your day for me to be background noise, for me to be entertainment. I appreciate that so much. It's been an incredible journey, and I can't thank you enough for helping me along the way. And until next time, peace.